How's it going, everybody? You having a good day? All right, let's see if we can make it better. Cool. I'm here, I'm Dan Olsen. It's awesome to talk with you today. I'm here to talk about how to ensure your backlog is going to deliver customer value. Real quick, so you know where I'm coming from, my background, I started out as an engineer. Luckily, my parents got me a computer when I was 9. I'm so grateful they did, so I've been coding since then. My first job, actually, out of college was managing submarine design. And after doing that, I realized I want to get more in software and work on the business side of things. So I went to Silicon Valley. I went to business school at Stanford. And that's where I learned about product management as a career. And I said, wow, that sounds like an awesome job. I've never done it before. I asked everybody I could find, where's the best place to learn it since I've never done it? And everybody said Intuit was the best place to learn it. So I was fortunate to get a job at Intuit as a product manager and worked there for a while, getting promoted and becoming a product leader. I learned a lot of great stuff about software development and product management there. After that, I worked at a few startups. Like a lot of people, I had dreams of having my own startup, so I did that for 4 years, which was a lot of fun. And what I've been doing for quite a while now is product consulting and coaching and training, helping teams basically build better products and stronger product teams. For those, any of you guys that are in the Silicon Valley, I run a monthly meetup. It's actually been 5 years now in Mountain View at Intuit's headquarters called Lean Product, if you want to check that out. So I know there's a lot of discussions at this conference, which has been an awesome conference, about Agile. We all know the benefits of Agile and building things incrementally and iteratively. But like Max was saying, when I take a step back and I think about it, Agile answers the question, how should we build a product? How should we go about, and what are the steps that we should follow, the process that we should follow? And that's great, and we want to get better at that, right? And everyone's at different points in their Agile journey, and we want to get better at that. But it doesn't really answer the question, what product should we be building? If you think about it, right? It's a way to build whatever you've decided you want to do. And so what I like to do as a thought exercise is think about, what's your team's real limiting factor? What I actually did, I forgot to mention, I studied industrial engineering. I read the goal. And there's this idea of a bottleneck in any kind of system or process, right? So what's the bottleneck on creating value? What's your limiting factor? Let's imagine for a sec that your team are complete Agile rock stars, right? You've got the world's fastest velocity, right? You have the highest quality code. So bugs aren't an issue, execution speed's not an issue. What would be the limiting factor of your team at that point in creating customer value, right? Just think about that for a sec, right? And another way that people say it is that, Agile, if you get really fast, you can build the wrong thing very quickly, right? And so there's more going on. It's important to build those muscles and get good at that. But once you get to that point, you realize, gosh, well, what are we putting into this awesome Agile Ferrari every 2 weeks? What are we putting in there? How do we know that's creating value? And so I want to share a story of a product that I worked on. We're very customer-centric at Intuit. And so, we went out and we talked to customers and said, hey, what do you want? What do you want the product to be? And this is how they described it to us. The product manager wrote it up. This is kind of how they envisioned the product to be. And the team went about working on the product. We got to the alpha. It wasn't quite perfect. There were some issues with the alpha product. But we completely fixed them in the beta. We adapted, we iterated. The beta was fine. Marketing got involved. That's how they marketed the product out there. We had an original launch date. We didn't quite hit it. This is what was actually ready by the original launch date. We went out and talked to the press about it. Here's what they had to say about our product. And it turns out what the customer really wanted the whole time was this, right? So I just did a little funny cartoon strip to show that, again, before we decide what to put into Agile, there's a lot of uncertainty. Just like there's a lot of uncertainty when you're trying to figure out the technical challenges in implementing something and what the scope is going to be. There's a lot of uncertainty in, hey, what's going to really solve customer problems and deliver customer value? And so if we take a step back, I have a high-level process I like to call the 4 Ds. Agile is obviously focused on delivery, which is really important because without delivery, we're not going to create any value. But there's actually several phases before that I like to think about. The first is discover. The second is define. The third is design. And the fourth is develop, right? And so it's a process. And the way I like to describe these is what are the key questions that we're trying to answer in each phase? What are the uncertainties that we're trying to reduce? All right? In the discovery phase, it's getting clear on who is our customer. And not just at a high level like it's SMBs or developers, but really peeling the onion and getting more specific. And I'll talk about that in a sec. And what are their needs, right? That's what discovery is all about, getting to the point where you have a certain degree of confidence in your answers to those questions. Define is great once we know those things. How are we going to meet their needs? And how are we going to be better than the other products that are out there? We'll talk about value proposition in a little bit. And what should our feature set be as a result before we even get into any of the other phases, right? The next one is, once we're clear on those questions, is what should our design be? What should our user experience be? How do we ensure we're delivering usability and delight to customers and doing user testing to validate that we're meeting those objectives? And then finally, develop, not to minimize it, but we build it, basically, right? So again, like I said, there are plenty of other talks today optimizing how you go about the develop phase. So I want to spend some time on the other 3 phases so that you can basically answer this question, how should we decide? As a team, how should we decide what product to build? Again, assuming our agile process is a Ferrari, how should we decide what product to build? And there's a lot of uncertainty there. And what I found is, after working into it in startups and as a consultant working with a lot of companies, basically a set of conditions that need to hold true in order to achieve product market fit and answer this question. And so that's why I wrote my book, The Lean Product Playbook. It's a guide to that, and I'm going to be sharing some advice from the book today. And a core way to think about the book is it's a guide to how to achieve product market fit. And product market fit is one of these buzzwords, right? Anytime you have a buzzword, it may not be clearly defined. It was actually coined by Mark Andreessen back in 2007 of Netscape fame, and it became more popular with the lean startup movement, right? But people talk about it pretty simplistically. If you Google product market fit, it might say, oh yeah, Box succeeded because they had product market fit. Sadly, startup X failed because they did not have product market fit. It's like this Boolean true-false thing. You either have it or you don't, and there wasn't a lot of guidance. And so like I said, after working on so many products, I saw kind of a meta pattern that needs to hold true, the conditions in order to achieve it. And so the key framework that I want to share with you is the product market fit pyramid. And it's got 5 layers. It's a pyramid. And like a real pyramid, the idea is each layer is meant to build on the layer beneath it, right? The bottom 2 layers are the market layers. The foundation of the pyramid, the bottommost layer, is a target customer. Whose life are we trying to make easier? Who are we trying to create customer value for? Whose pain points are we trying to address, right? And we want to get really clear on that. And the next level up is for that customer that we just identified, what are their needs? We don't want to focus on solutions or features yet. We're going to have to build features later, obviously. We want to get clear on what are their needs and pain points. And more specifically, what I call their underserved needs, right? If they're perfectly happy with how a need is being met today, that's probably not what we want to address, right? And like a real pyramid, if we change who our target customer is, the whole thing could come crashing down and we have to start over again. But if you look in an economics or marketing textbook, it'll say, hey, the definition of a market is a group of people that share a set of common needs. So those are the market layers, and you don't actually control the market layers. You can pick which market layer you want to target, but you can't control it. What you control are the product layers, which I like to describe with these 3 layers. Value proposition. In an ideal world, this builds directly on underserved needs. This is what needs are we actually going to tell customers that our product addresses for them, and how are we going to do so in a way that's better or different. That's the essence of product strategy, lives there. The next layer up is feature set. That's actually the functionality that conveys those benefits to the customer, and that's where the concept of MVP comes in. We don't want to overbuild and overcommit before we realize whether or not we're going in the right direction. And then finally, user experience. That's what the user actually interacts with to use the functionality to get the benefits. And like I said, this is like one big 5-term and thing. In order to get product market fit, what I'm saying is you have to be right enough about your target customer, and right enough about the underserved needs, and right enough about your value prop, and right enough about your feature set, and right enough about your UX. That's basically the idea. And when you see the pyramid like this, you realize product market fit is just when we make those assumptions and executions in the top 3 layer for the market that we're going after, how good a job are we doing? How does it resonate with the target market that we're going after? That's basically product market. That's my definition of product market fit and the conditions you need to achieve it, right? Now, once I developed this, I realized, hey, I can create a simple process to guide teams through articulating and validating these hypotheses. It's called the Lean Product Process. You start at the bottom of the pyramid. You articulate your assumptions about your target customer, then their underserved needs. You work your way up the pyramid, value prop, feature set, UX, and then there's just one final step, which is when you get to that tip of the pyramid and you have a UX prototype, say, or your live product, you can then actually go and test it with customers to close the loop and see where you're at with product market fit. And if you have a live product, that's fine, but I'm a big, big fan of using prototypes like InVision and other prototyping tools to test things before you actually invest any dev resources. And I won't have time to share that case study today probably, but in my other talks I have that. So let's jump into the Lean Product Process. The first, like I said, the foundation of the pyramid is your target customer. And I want to show why this is so important, because a lot of teams skip this step. They just jump right into, well, most teams jump into solutions. Some jump into what are the benefits. But what I want to show is that by getting clear on your target customer, it helps you really get clear and peel the onion on the detailed benefits that matter to them. So let's talk about a need that a lot of people have, the need for transportation within 100 miles of your home, right? That's a need that probably many of you have to get to work, to get to the store, right, to get to the hospital, whatever it is. And if we stayed at that level, it would be kind of a high-level, superficial discussion, right? But what I want to show is as soon as we get clear looking through the lens of specific customers, let's say on the one hand a soccer parent, on the other hand a speed demon, they both have those detailed, they both have that high level need, but if we were to do discovery with them, we'd find that their detailed needs and preferences are quite different. If I went on and did discovery interviews with 20 soccer parents, for example, I might learn things like, yes, I have the high level need, but what's important to me is, I'm driving my children and their friends around all the time. The car's got to be big enough to hold all of them and all their sports equipment. So I'm thinking about how big the car is. I'm driving my children around. They're the most important thing in the world to me, so I'm thinking about safety. And I'm doing a lot of driving, so I'm just mindful of how much I'm spending on gas. Those might be some detailed things that we learn if we were to do those interviews. If we go and interview 20 speed demons, we probably wouldn't hear any of those things. We might hear things like this. Well, it's important to me that the car goes really fast, that the car looks cool, and most importantly, that I look cool when I'm driving down the street in my car. And you end up with very different products as a result. Both products address the high-level basic need, but they do so in a way that's been really optimized for that target market segment. And that's why I like to talk about cars, all the different shapes and sizes of cars that are out there. Think about it. You got Scions, you got pickups, you got SUVs, you got minivans, right? They've done a really good job of optimizing the product for product market fit for that detailed segment. So we want to get clear on that. Once we're clear on that, then basically we want to talk about customer needs. For that customer, that soccer parent or that speed demon, what are their needs, right? And again, this is where many teams just jump into solutions and start talking about feature ideas and putting them straight into the JIRA tickets, right? And so an important concept that I learned in my career is the difference between problem space and solution space. And I want to illustrate that real quick. Problem space is basically a customer problem, need, or benefit that the product should address. So a well-written user story, as a blank, I want a blank so I can blank, that's in the problem space, right? In contrast, solution space is a specific implementation, either actual product or design, to address the customer need or requirement. So if I said, I want to make it easier for people to share photos with their friends, that statement, make it easier to share photos with your friends, would be in the problem space. And if the next thing I said is, yeah, and I spent the last 4 months building an app that does that, that app that does the sharing would be in the solution space. Or if I said, hey, my friend Max is an awesome designer, he created a bunch of mock-ups for this app that lets you share your photos with your friends, those designs would be in the solution space. So that's the difference, basically, right? And like I said, a lot of teams just jump right into solution space without getting clear on the problem. And what good teams do is they actually stop and they separate the two. When somebody recommends a solution, hey, I think we should add a drop-down, we stop and we say why, and we get to what was the problem that you're trying to solve. The example that I like to use to illustrate this is when NASA was sending astronauts into space, they knew that the pens that we use here on Earth that rely on gravity wouldn't work in space because there's no gravity. And I should say this right now, if you Google it, you'll end up on some Snopes or urban legend thing or something. The key point is, did NASA do this or not? NASA didn't do it. But one of NASA's contractors, and NASA didn't ask him to do it, said, you know what? I think we can invent a pen that writes in space. And this guy Fisher went off and spent $1 million of his own money and invented a space pen. So I have a space pen here. I haven't validated it in space myself yet, but I hope to one day if I'm lucky, right? So it actually does the job. It works fine in outer space where there's no gravity. Now the Russians, they had to send their astronauts into space too, but what they did is they just gave their astronauts pencils. And you can actually get a Russian space pen. It's just a cheeky joke. It's a red pencil in a box poking fun at the space pen, right? So why do I mention this story? I mention this story, one, obviously, if these are both equally good solutions to the problem, then the one that didn't cost $1 million and all that time and effort is a better ROI, a better solution. That's the obvious lesson. But the more subtle lesson is, even when you're trying to focus on the problem space, it's easy to let some solution space thinking creep in. And I call that solution pollution. And so when the head of the Fisher company said, hey, I think I can design a pen that writes in space, and that was his requirement statement, he had some solution pollution there. What was the solution pollution that he had? Yeah, he had pen. He baked the solution into the requirement, right? It would have been better if he'd just been vague and hand waved and said, we're going to create a way to write in space. That would be better. That would be more solution agnostic, right? Let's talk about how does this really happen on our teams, though. This is all NASA stuff, right? How does this happen? This is what it looks like in JIRA, right? Add a drop-down that does blankety-blank, right? Build a wizard that does this. Add an API call for that. Are those tickets solutions or problems? They're solutions, right? And it's funny because I was just giving an Agile training the other day, and I put up the slide, as a blank, I want a blank so I can blank, and everyone's like, yeah, we already know that. And then I look in Jira, and none of the tickets look like that. I'm like, why do you all get user story template amnesia every time you go into Jira? What happens there, right? What happens? So we're going to talk about that. But this is what happens. And this is perfectly fine. Now, when somebody says, hey, add a dropdown, they're not realizing it. They're just like short-circuiting and jumping the problem. They think that's the best solution, but they're not getting explicit about it, right? And that's what that solution pollution is. The number one tactic, if somebody says, hey, add a dropdown, just ask why. Just say, why? Why do you? Oh, well, we need to give the user a way to set the priority level of the ticket. Okay, great. Maybe a drop-down's the best way. Maybe there's another way, right? But by putting the story there, if you don't put the story there, everybody on the team loses the why behind why we're trying to build whatever it is, if you jump straight to the solutions, right? So how do we do this? The cool thing is Jira has native support for this, right? It has user stories, and it has subtasks. So my best practice that I see teams do is, the user story is where you keep the problem. You put it in the user story. And then, of course, I should say, of course, at the end of the day, we need to build database tables and API methods and UI. I know we need to build that. So we need to get clear on what are the dev tasks that support that story. That's what subtasks are for, right? And you get that nice parent-child relationship that you can track. So that's how we have our cake and eat it too. Because the other advantage of having the user story there is everyone on the team, they're all smart. If they understand the why, they may be able to independently come up with other cool ideas on how to solve that problem that we didn't even think of when we were writing the subtasks, right? It empowers everybody on the team to understand what we're trying to accomplish. Here's a specific example filled out. As an airline traveler, I want to filter search results by how long the flight is so I can easily see the shortest flights, right? That's a user story. And then we could have subtasks of, okay, we're going to add a slider control so they can specify the maximum flight time. You can imagine a kayak UI or something, right? Expand the API method because it doesn't currently support flight time as an input. And if we do, if we're going to bring results back this way, we have an optimizer database. Let's index that column so we get fast results. That would be an example of how you have the user story as well as the subtasks that are there. Let's talk about more of a software example. This is my favorite example to share, and it's actually very timely right now. On the left is problem space, on the right is solution space. I used to work at Intuit. One of our big products is TurboTax. Who's used TurboTax in the last, say, 15 months? Who's about to use it? Or yeah, it's April 11th. They've enabled a whole generation of people to wait till the 14th. I haven't filed yet myself. So anyway, it's a solution. It's an app, so it's in the solution space, right? It competes with another app in the solution space, TaxCut. And what we can do is we can map back and forth between these. We can try to reverse engineer. For all of you that said TurboTax, try to tell me, if you could tell me why you use it, what benefit, what value it delivers for you, just yell it out, somebody. Easy. What else? Cheap. Nice. Convenient. Accurate. Okay. Self-driven. Anything else? What's that? Fast. We're getting one-word answers. Very succinct group. I like this. This is good. But we have 6 different benefits, right? Sometimes they get things like, well, I love how it, I can e-file right away. I love how it does it. So that's the thing about the problem space. You're gonna get. I got like 6 different answers in like 30 seconds, right? The problem space is messy, but our job is to make sense of it. The other thing is it can be helpful to know what's the onion that we're operating on. What's the general area? We want to get more detailed like we did before. And I would say the general area would be something like, hey, it helps me prepare my taxes, helps me do my taxes. And what we'd want to do is break it down into the more detailed benefits that you said. The other person that really helped me appreciate the importance of problem space for solution space was Intuit's founder, Scott Cook. So when he would be speaking to a group of employees like this, one of the things he used to love to do at the end of it would be like, hey, who's the biggest competitor to TurboTax? And all the new Eager Beaver product managers would raise their hand and hope that he picked them and you would get it right. And he'd pick you, and he'd be like, it's TaxCut. He'd be like, no, you're wrong. It's pen and paper because there's more Americans. He'd love to do that trick question. The more Americans were doing their taxes with pen and paper. That was true. That was what it was, right? So that's the other thing is the solutions come and go. They can come and go rather quickly, like innovation S-curve technology, S-curves that come and go. The problems in that market layer do not change anywhere near as quickly. In the book, I talk about the market for the need to listen to music on the go. Probably a lot of you like to do it, right? We all do it on our iPhones today, but back in the day, it was Walkman, and before that, it was FM transistor radios, and in between, it was like iPods and MP3 players, right? So a lot of different tech waves that address the same fundamental problem. So what we want to do when we're working on our product is start in the problem space, identify the onion, the context that we're working on, and this is the fun part. Say we were, back in the day, working on V1 of TurboTax, we would set this as our context. And this is the fun part, where as a team you get to do divergent thinking. And you just suspend judgment and disbelief. You don't worry about effort or feasibility. And you say, what are all the different ways that we could help someone with their taxes? This is a fun exercise. And you might come up things with, well, compared to pen and paper, they can check your taxes because it's a computer. Make sure you don't, someone said accurate, right? It can file my taxes. Instead of having to go to the post office, I can just e-file. It can ask me a bunch of questions to ask me what I did and identify write-offs or deductions for me that I might not have known about. It can analyze my return and say, hey, this looks kind of risky, or no, you look pretty safe from an audit standpoint, right? These are just 4 detailed illustrative ones that I put out there. You guys had a lot of other ones too. But that's what you want to do. This is how the fundamental answer of how you make sure your backlog delivers value is starting here with real customer needs, hypotheses about customer needs, I should say at this point, right? And you'll notice that they follow a certain template. Not to get too grammatical, but what part of speech do they all start with? A verb. Check, file, maximize, reduce. Because the product is actually doing something to create customer value, right? And then the other thing is, whose perspective are they written from? It's not the products, it's not the companies, it's the customers. My taxes, my returns, my deductions. So that's a kind of lightweight template to know that you're kind of writing good benefits. And again, I want to actually show the onion. We want to peel the onion and brainstorm and explore that problem space at this divergent thinking stage. Explore what are all the different benefits that we could do, right? And if you look over time, TurboTax has added quite a few. It's like, oh, hey, you're getting a refund. Do you want to get the money now instead of in 3 months? Well, we can solve that. That's something that they iterated and added later on. So you want to come up with all the crazy ideas you could do. And then at some point, we'll converge and realize that we can't do them all. Now, the problem space is messy. As you saw, I got 6 different answers in 30 seconds. It's like, I'll forget that. How are we going to make sense of that? Let's just design and build it and ship it, right? So it is messy, but you'll find that there is some organization to the chaos. And the way that works is you'll find benefits that even though they are distinct at the atomic level, they kind of feel like they're related. And when you do customer discovery interviews and you do the 5 whys with people, say, why is this valuable, why is this valuable? Kind of like a toddler, like, why? Then you eventually get, what you're doing is you're getting them to up level. Someone may say, oh, I like how it does my cost basis on Schedule D for me. That's very detailed. And I go, why? I eventually get to an overarching kind of benefit, right? And by doing that, this is called the benefit ladder, because you can envision that each time I ask why, I'm getting them to climb a step on a ladder. These 3 stories that seem distinct may all be on the same ladder, which is empowerment or confidence. And the way that narrative might go is, hey, before TurboTax, I had to do my taxes every year because it's legally required. I'm really bad with numbers. I don't know anything about the tax code, and yet each year I have to fill out my taxes by hand. It's very nerve-wracking. I'm very anxious. I'm probably making a mistake. They're probably going to come find me or throw me in jail. But then my friend recommended TurboTax. I used it. It held my hand. It asked me question after question, step by step. Next thing you know, I finished my taxes. I felt a lot more empowered and confident. That would be how that narrative might go. There could be a completely distinct benefit ladder. It has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with saving time, right? And we could break down the detailed benefits. Well, preparing taxes the old way took me 5 days, and now with TurboTax it takes 1. Or filing used to take me a few hours. Now it takes me a minute. And there could be a complete distinct ladder from that, which is all about saving you money, whether it's maximize your deductions or saving money compared to a CPA, right? So this is what I call a problem space definition. You don't need any more than 2 levels. You don't need to get too complicated. You have your detailed benefits and then the ladders organized, right? And your team ideally comes up with this problem space definition. And again, we still haven't said which of these we're going to do. We're just exploring the problem space. And you notice that I spent a lot of time talking about TurboTax without actually mentioning any actual features. You can actually spend a lot of time in problem space if you want. It turns out that TurboTax happens to have a feature directly mapped to each one of these benefits. And the side benefit, when you have that tight one-for-one solution problem mapping and you have a well-named feature, the side benefit is, without knowing anything about the feature, just by seeing the name of it, people can figure out how it's going to deliver value for them. And hopefully you can see that with those names. All right, so that's a problem space definition. After we do divergent thinking, reality comes to roost, and it's like, that's great. That's great that we brainstormed 20 different things that we could do. What are we going to actually do in the next 6 months with our product? We need to converge, which means we need to prioritize, which begs the question, how should we prioritize? And the right answer, I think, is on customer value, which then begs the question, great, how do we optimize on customer value? When I faced this question at Intuit, I developed a framework called importance versus satisfaction that I found very useful, that worked really well. We had really good market research people that work with us, and so we would get importance and satisfaction data from our users, and that's how I developed that. Let me walk you through this real quick. The importance is on the y-axis. It's for whatever particular need we're talking about, whether it's save time or save money. How important is that to you as a customer, to our target customer, right? And you can imagine this 2 ways. One is we could do a big formal survey and get very quantitative with statistical significance. The other way is just as a thinking tool with your team. Hey, do we think this is low, medium, high? Let's put each need on a sticky and put it where it belongs, right? The second one is satisfaction, the x-axis. How satisfied are people with how that need is getting met today? Right, those are the things we want to think about as we're thinking about customer value. And let's divide it into quadrants so we could talk about it. So in the bottom left, we have low importance, low satisfaction. Bottom right, we have low importance, high satisfaction. At the end of the day, neither of these are worth going after with your team's precious resources and time, right? It's just because at the end of the day, it's a low importance need. In the upper right quadrant, now we have high importance of user needs, so that's better. It's high importance, but we also have high satisfaction. So people are saying, yeah, it's important, but I'm pretty happy with how I'm getting that met today. That's a competitive market. That's a definition of a competitive market, right? And the first thing I always think of here is like Google internet search, basically, right? It's like if I say, how important is it to you to find things online? Pretty important, but it's not like people walk around and going, hey, this Google search doesn't work for me, I can't find anything. It works pretty good, right? And you hear people say you need to be 10x better. I'm not saying you can't go into a competitive market, but that's where you need to be 10x better. You can't just come in with a Me Too knockoff product. People aren't going to switch, so you got to get really clear on that. And then finally, the upper left quadrant is high importance of user need. People are saying it's really important, but they're not satisfied with how they're getting met today. That's where opportunities lie. That's the best quadrant ideally, and things won't be in that quadrant forever because there are a lot of other companies and teams trying to find those opportunities and address them. But if you do the analysis, you can find some of those opportunities. The first thing that comes to mind for me in this quadrant is the ride-sharing companies Uber and Lyft. I live in the Bay Area, where in the old days when you had to call a cab, they'd be like, call a cab. Yeah, it'll be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, no cab. You call back, hey, where's the cab? I don't know. There'll be another one in 20 minutes, right? And it wasn't that great. And we can get more detailed, like, hey, how convenient was it to pay? You know, like on this trip, I took Lyfts and taxis, and it was kind of annoying at the end of my taxi ride to have to actually pay versus just auto pay, right? So we could break it down. And conversely, if I said, hey, how important is it to get your flight at the airport on time? Pretty important. How important is it to get to that meeting, to that medical appointment, whatever it is? So I think that's one of the reasons they've been so successful. And this framework is meant to be a visual framework. So what I'm saying is if you have a certain product represented by the red dot that addresses a need with that level of importance, with that level of satisfaction, it makes a rectangle when you plot it in the importance satisfaction space. And the area of that rectangle, the size of that rectangle, is kind of a proxy for how much customer value that product delivers. And if there's another product represented by the green dot, has higher importance, higher satisfaction, its rectangle is just that much bigger, it delivers that much more customer value, right? And once you realize that, you realize, wow, then if we take the best product in the market, however much area there is to the right when we plot that, that's the area, that's the opportunity to create customer value. And the bigger that rectangle is, the bigger the opportunity, right? So as a result, basically, the closer you are to this upper left corner, the more opportunity there is, basically, right? And the closer you are to the right edge, the more satisfied people are. If this all seems a little conceptual and abstract, let me show you some real-world importance and satisfaction data. This is where we surveyed a lot of users, basically, on 13 key features. And we had a big sample size. And we got everyone to rate numerically, basically, and convert the to numbers. So now instead of low, medium, high, we have 0 to 100. Right? And each of the features is plotted with its importance and satisfaction. The label next to the dot is the satisfaction, just so you can see it. So as the PM for this product, the first thing I noticed was this one up here. I'm like, this is great. Customers are saying 100% importance, and we're delivering 98% satisfaction. My first reaction is, awesome job, team. My second reaction was, let's not waste any time or touch that. We might actually mess it up. Let's not do that. Let's just go find other bigger fish to fry, bigger opportunities that are going to create more customer value. And we had a cluster of ideas here, and we had this one here. But this was the one that was the most up and left, right? It was relatively high importance and relatively low satisfaction. So we used this to prioritize that feature to focus on improving for the next version of the product. And so I switched context a little bit. Before I was talking about opportunity identification, but now you can see how you can use importance versus satisfaction to assess where you are with product market fit of your existing product and features to decide where you need to improve, right? And I was really excited. A few years after I left Intuit, I came across this book called What Customers Want by Tony Ulwick. And lo and behold, he had his own importance versus satisfaction framework that was pretty similar to mine. So it gave me a lot of confidence that it was kind of a helpful tool. All right. So once we get clear on that, that's when we diverge and we make sure that the ideas that we're going to focus on are going to deliver customer value, underserved needs. We want to get clear on our value proposition. And I mentioned I studied industrial engineering before. One of the things I learned there is the Kano model. Who's heard of the Kano model before? Got some folks? All right, cool. So it came out of more like the quality movement, the Toyota production system stuff. But I actually applied it to product management. And it's a great way to think about how your product's going to be better or different. Let me walk you through it, and I'll show you how we apply it. It also talks about user needs and satisfaction. On the x-axis is, for the need that we're talking about, how fully does a product meet the need? From not at all to fully make, 0% to 100%. And then the y-axis is just as a result, as a function of how much the product meets the need, how much user satisfaction or dissatisfaction results. The cool thing, this seems a little complicated, the cool thing about Kano models, it breaks everything down into one of 3 categories of needs. The first and easiest to get your head around is a performance benefit or feature. Basically here, more is better, less is worse. The more the product meets the need, the more customer satisfaction is created. The less the product meets the need, the less satisfaction is created, right? If we were in the microprocessor business and our chip was 15% faster than everybody else's, we'd be outperforming everybody by 15%. That's a clear example of performance. Going back to cars, if I was shopping for a new car and there were 2 cars and they seemed pretty similar and their specs are pretty similar, but then at the last minute I realized, oh, car B has twice the miles per gallon as car A, all other things being equal, I would pick that because miles per gallon is usually a performance benefit for people. All right, so that's performance. The second category is must-haves. Now, having a must-have doesn't actually make anybody happy. You can see here when the product fully meets the must-haves, it doesn't actually make anybody happy. But not addressing the must-haves makes customer unhappy. That's the definition of a must-have. Say I was shopping for a car, I go into the showroom, I love the way it looks, I read the spec sheet on the window, it all looks good, but then I peek my head inside and I realize, this car doesn't have seat belts, right? I wouldn't buy it. I'd be afraid of dying or getting hurt, right? Seat belts are a must-have for a car. But if car A has 5 seat belts and car B has 100 seat belts, I don't say, oh, car B is 20 times better than car A, right? And once you have 1 seat belt per person, you're good to go, right? That's must-haves. And then the third category is delighters or wow features. Now, not having a delighter doesn't cause any problem because customers aren't expecting them to be there, right? But having a delighter can really create a lot of customer value. Not today, but back in the day when the first cars came out with GPS navigation, it was a delighter, right? Before that, people were printing out Google Maps or asking for directions or getting lost. And then the first few cars came out with GPS navigation. Just put in your address, fundamentally changes how you get from point A to point B. But as we know over time, more and more cars got GPS navigation. TomTom and Garmin came out with their add-on units, and now we all just navigate with our phone. That just shows you that this isn't a static picture. It's actually dynamic, with the needs and features migrating over time so that yesterday's delighters become today's performance features, become tomorrow's must-haves. And the pace with which that happens just depends on the level of innovation and competition in your space. So why am I telling you about the Kano model? We're just going to use these 3 categories of must-have, performance, and delighter to get clear on our value proposition. And again, our value proposition is, out of all the benefits we talked about as a team, which ones are we going to actually say to users, customers, we deliver these benefits for you, and how are we going to do so in a way that's better than our competition? The way we get clear on this is we just create a simple grid, and we list, I've kept it generic, but we list for our product category, for our onion, what are basically 1 per row, what are the must-have benefits, performance benefits, delighters, 1 per row. That's step 1 to build this table. The next step is you list a column for each of your competitors, key competitors, and a column for your product. Right? You don't want to have 20, but 3, 4, 5, that's fine. The next thing you do is you score or rate your competition, right? And it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Low, medium, high is pretty good. Yes, no works for delighters and must-haves, right? So in this case, we've got 2 competitors. They both have the must-have. Competitor A is the best at performance benefit 1. Competitor B is the best at performance benefit 2. And I've kept it generic so you might envision what it is for your space. We'll do a specific example in a sec. They're both medium at performance benefit 3, and competitor A has a delighter, right? This is the backdrop upon which we want to actually come up with our value prop. We need to think about where are we going to play offense, where are we going to seed, how are we going to be best in the market. We don't want to launch a Me Too product, right? And we can't, and I run these workshops all the time. Sometimes the team goes, high. We're going to be high on all 5. We're going to win all the things. It's like you can't be high on all 5. You don't have the resources. It's not a clear positioning, right? So you got to pick. And one of my favorite definition strategies, it means saying no. So where are we saying no, right? So given this competitive landscape, we might go with this value prop. Of course, we're going to have the must-have. We're going to do some on performance benefit 1, but we're not going to try to be the best at it. We're going to say no to performance benefit 2, right? That's where we're going to be strategic and say no and save resources. And then we're going to try to be the best at performance benefit 3. Maybe we've identified a market segment that really values that benefit. Maybe we've come up with some solution ideas as to why we think we can deliver a better job compared to other products out there on that solution, right? And then we have our own unique delighter here. The whole point of this exercise, what matters the most, is what's called your unique differentiators. And those are the performance benefit where you plan to be the best and your unique delighters, right? You don't compete on must-haves. So the whole point of this exercise is for our team to get clear on what's our special sauce, what makes our product special, where are we going to outperform, and where are we going to out-delight, basically, right? So that when we go to the rest of the product process of thinking about features and coming up with designs, we make sure that those are conveyed. Sorry to go back, guys. That these are in there. If we go and specify an MVP that doesn't have these 2 in it, what are we testing, right? If we do a prototype that doesn't have these 2 in it, what are we testing, right? So we want to get clear on this so then when we go to the next stage, we get clear on it. All right, so that was a kind of generic example. Let's talk about a specific example. Who's used Instagram here? A lot of people. Excellent. That's why I pick it. Cool. Not today. We got to go in the time machine and go back to when Instagram first came out. When Instagram first came out, there were a lot of other photo sharing apps on the market already, right? Crowded market. They come in. They quickly shoot up to number one. And every once in a while, you see this pattern happen where crowded market, new product, shoots up to number one. And what I want to do is try to see if we can reverse engineer how can we explain why they shot up to number one through the value prop Kano model lens. And I think we can reverse engineer. So let's go through and think about how did Instagram, at the time, how did they outperform or outdelight the other photo sharing apps that are out there? Anybody have ideas? Yeah. Filters, that's the number one answer I get, definitely. Now, are filters a solution or a problem? They're a solution, which is fine. But then how do we get to the problem? We say why. Why are they valuable to you as a user? Why are filters valuable? They make your pictures look better. I hear things like they make my pictures look great. They make me look like a professional photographer. They let me my pictures look creative. Those are kind of the answers that we're talking. So those are the benefits that filters deliver. And I'll ask this, are they a performance benefit or a delighter? They were a delighter, right? No one else really had all these awesome filters that they did. Cool, awesome, thank you. So we got our first delighter. Any other delighters or ways that they outperform the other apps? The other thing about performance is usually you can measure. It's something you can measure. You can say, hey, these guys, this is the number for these guys, this is the number for these guys. Any other ones? What? Fast? Did I hear fast? Yeah. Faster what? Faster upload, that's right. The word faster, that tells you it's a comparative performance benefit, right? It's a performance benefit because it's faster. And it was faster. If you took a stopwatch and took, say, the other top 10 apps at the time, you might get, say, 6 to 9 second range of upload for photos back then, right? And if you did Instagram, you might get, 4 to 6 instead. It would shave off, 2 or 3 seconds, right? They basically did back then. So that's right. That's how they outperformed. The interesting thing is, do you know how they did that? That's the benefit. So we started in the benefit. We didn't actually cover the solution. Do you know how they did it? I'm sure they had really good compression and algorithms and servers and all that jazz, but they actually wrote up in a blog post how they did it, and it was just a clever UX hack. That's what they did. Everybody else at the time, it was, these are the new photo sharing apps were new, and it was the first gen. Everyone, the way it would work is you'd get your phone out, you get the app, you take a picture, and then it would show you the picture, and it would have an upload button. And just human time, by the time you looked at the picture and pushed the button, 2 or 3 seconds would pass. The Instagram team just said, hey, you know what? 90% plus of the time, people just upload the photo. So why don't we just start uploading it the second you take the picture, and we'll still have the upload button there. So they took that natural lag of clicking, tapping, that they got credit for. It's like, whoa, my gosh, how did they upload it, right? That's how they did it. And the guy wrote a blog post about it. So very clever hack, but it did have the perception of the marketplace as being faster. Awesome. So we got our outperform. We have a delighter. There's one other delighter that makes your photos look good that's a little more subtle than filters. Does anybody know? Have an idea? All right, so when you take a photo, you can take a photo landscape or you can take a photo portrait. Does anyone remember when you took your first Instagram photo and it was square? I was pissed. I was like, what are you guys doing cropping my photo? Why are you cropping my photo? There's a subtle reason why. Not when you take the photo, but when you then try to mix landscape and portrait in a feed, in a single width feed, guess what happened to the landscape? They get shrunk. It's not going to look as good. That's why they did square, so that when you put them in a feed, they all look nice and pretty, right? So a little more subtle way that they made your photos look good. Awesome. So we identified the 3 things. Let's throw it into the value prop grid. All right, so we've got other photo sharing apps all lumped together. We've got Instagram. We've got must-haves, performance, and delighters. We didn't even cover the must-have. Obviously, if you're a photo sharing app, you need to let me share your photos, right? They both have that, right? Makes sense? Performance benefit. Post my photos quickly, low and high, because of the UX hack that they did, basically. And then delighters, make my photos look good, supported by filters and the square aspect ratio. Nobody else has it. Everybody else has it. Does that make sense? And again, their unique differentiators are those too, right? And so they had a very powerful, if you have an outperform, a clear outperform, and a clear delight, that is a very powerful combination to deliver customer value. And to me, that explains why they were able to shoot up in a crowded field of apps and become number one. And once you look at, when you see that pattern and you see a product do that, you can often reverse engineer and figure out, wow, it's because they had this clear outperform and this clear delight. At a minimum, you need the outperform, right? At a minimum, you have to outperform the other people. But if you have a delighter, it can be a very powerful combination as well. The other cool thing, and I actually had someone the other day say, well, Dan, is this just revisionist history? You like creating this after the fact? It's not, and the reason I know and I can be confident is because they actually, their tagline, they had a tagline back in the day at the very beginning. I don't expect anyone to remember. In case you remember, their tagline back then when they first came out was this: fast, beautiful photo sharing. So it's 4 words, but it's super powerful because they managed to get their whole value prop in 4 words. They have their must-have, photo sharing. They're a photo sharing app, right? They have their performance benefit, fast, and they have their delighter, beautiful, right? That's the other thing about having a really clear value prop is it makes your messaging super easy and customers can really understand, like with TurboTax, what it's going to do for them, right? And the other thing, for messaging, it's valuable for product, it's valuable for messaging. It's also even valuable for the teams. Not that they have to or that they would, but you can imagine organizing your teams this way. Hey, I'm on the fast team. Our job is to keep decreasing that upload time and make it as short as it can be. Hey, I'm on the delighter team. I'm on the beautiful team. Our job is to make your photos as beautiful as possible. Yeah, we have filters and square aspect ratio today. What's the next set of features we're going to build for beautiful? And I'm on the photo sharing team. Our job is to enable people to share photos on all the different platforms and ways that they want, right? So it can be a very powerful thing. All right, real quick then, the next thing, we've been in problem space this whole time. We do need to jump to solution space to come up with features. The way we have that tight mapping is we start with our value prop, and then again, we do divergent thinking, and we brainstorm all the different features, right? What I'm trying to show here is a mapping of, hey, for this performance benefit, where we said we're going to be the best, what are all of our feature ideas? And I encourage people to break them down into chunks, smaller chunks that we can identify, right? And basically, then, that's when you now can write your user stories, like I mentioned before. You keep the problem space in the user story, and you identify your subtasks, your solutions in the subtasks, basically, right? So hopefully that's a helpful walkthrough of how to make sure your backlog delivers customer value. I'm out of time. I just want to thank you for your time. You can, and I'll be sticking around here. I guess it's lunch in a couple minutes. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. So thanks a lot for your time.